thank you to Anna Collins. The excluded 3 million here. Let's just get our hands around this. Now, there is a package from Rishi Sunak, 4.6 billion to help businesses survive the third lockdown, but that's no good to so many people. Let's speak to Rachel Flower, spokesperson for Excluded UK, the collective platform for those excluded from the UK government COVID-19 support programmes. Rachel, good to have you with us. And I understand you kind of founded Excluded UK because you found yourself in this very position.
The Excluded UK was set up as a grassroots not-for-profit alliance back in May when it became apparent that these gaps in the support schemes existed. And initially we were just drawing attention to them and asking the government to fix them. We were quite patient, but obviously we, as the time has rolled on, and we're sat here really nearly a year on since the schemes were put in place, with people in an extremely dire financial position and also the mental health implications of that.
Yeah, and again, I mentioned just before you came on, as you would have heard, it's the across-the-board nature of this problem. It's a lot of people, but it's also a lot of industries.
Yeah, I mean, we're also at pains to say it's UK taxpayers. There's no evidence at all that they've done anything wrong to be excluded from the schemes. It's the hard edges and the policies attached to the schemes that have caused their exclusion. And it's the lack of political will on the part of the government to actually assess and then report in a transparent way to fix those schemes. So it's taxpayers, but also their households. Yeah. So we're talking about, the size of the problem is a population of the UK equivalent to Wales. It's 10% of the workforce. So trying to put this into perspective for people, the sheer scale of what we say is a social injustice and the lack of the government's will to fix it.
And in terms of the numbers, you've brilliantly broken them down there just to give us an idea of how big this is. Is anybody listening to this in government? Because they must, as I've said to previous guests today, that if we're talking about this on national radio, Rachel, they must be aware of it.
Yeah, we're a completely apolitical organisation. We're a pressure group. And so from our perspective, we are looking for due process and transparency about this. So we established the inquiry point for the all-party parliamentary group that now has 260 MPs, cross-party, calling for this. Of course, we've got Tracy Brabin bringing a request in Parliament just today, but there's been an incredible amount of pressure and attention over the months. For me, as a really a layperson, it actually has been absolutely shocking to see how difficult it is to really truly hold the government to account for these decisions that are made. And in the wake of the pandemic, the more worrying thing now is what is the economic impact for us as a nation when we're basically dividing off a sector of society and not supporting them with parity against those that have been adequately supported and enable really lots of people to come through the pandemic relatively unscathed because they've had some income support. These individuals have been pushed into debt, hardship. They're going to become potentially a burden upon the welfare state. They're going to be creating unemployment figures for the economy. So setting aside the moral, ethical question of why are these people not being fairly supported, that's just a pure parity question. We've been calling upon the government to answer the economic reasoning. What justification is there for not supporting them?
It doesn't make a lot of sense, and particularly when many of the people are, looking at the different industries, it's right across the board. A lot of these are small and medium-sized businesses. So the very areas you think might need some protection because they are likely to be the areas that in any other context would be getting us out of financial difficulties, because these are hardworking men and women who, are diligently putting together business plans, trying to expand their enterprises, no matter how big. These form the backbone of our economy. We often talk about the fact it's not always the Googles and the Starbucks that make this thing called the UK tick. It's people who work in these industries, people who have those small businesses, who diligently set them up and work really hard.
Yeah, I want to be really clear on that, though, that there are an element of that small business market that you talk to, and limited company directors, and they then themselves employ people. But actually, when surveyed, a large proportion of the individuals we're talking about are also low-income individuals. Sure. They are literally self-employed, sole traders earning a very modest income. And in a survey that we did, there was a vast proportion of our community who were only on maybe £20,000 to £25,000 or below when the pandemic started. So that's why we've seen such an extreme level of hardship. We have people in the community who can't feed their children, they've lost their homes, and they've been pushed into, as I say, a mental health crisis because they didn't have much to begin with. So we need to be careful when we're talking about the diversity to say it's not really businesses per se. There's an impact on some of the businesses that were, good, viable businesses, but actually it's the individuals and the taxpayers that are really hardest hit, arguably, by this. The job retention scheme and the SICE, the self-employed support schemes, they're essentially income support. So they are, trying to get parity to people. If you can't go out and earn a livelihood and you're staying home, saving lives, protecting the NHS, then the taxpayers' money that the Chancellor is responsible for should be helping them just to cover basic living expenses. So we're going to carry on calling for that backdated parity, because coming back to the economic point, all those people would do is pay off their debts, get back on top of their mortgage, their rent, and their utilities bills, and so on and so forth, so that they're not disadvantaged by the pandemic. That's only fair, just and right. Indeed. Listen, thorough stuff, Rachel. Thank you. Rachel Flower, spokesperson for Excluded UK. Do check out their website. You might discover certainly some understanding of your own position when you look at what the guys over there are representing and the arguments they're trying to advance. There is a debate in Parliament. Tracy Brabin, the MP, will be leading that debate